Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today, we are talking about the risk intelligence forecast for 2024 with Cory Bergman. Cory, great first segment there. Some good information and viewpoints. Now, let's actually jump into the report itself and some of the findings. Now, the first one on our list is artificial intelligence. Kind of an obvious one, really.
It is. It's the one trend that's kind of at the top of everyone's trend list. Yeah, I think it really is the year of where there's so many different AI impacts, and so they're really kind of led off with this one to talk about how it's originally kind of began this last year as a novelty and now is really becoming ubiquitous. It's getting really folded into so many different. Somebody said the other day, they said every time you see a text box on the internet, there will be the ability to have an AI suggest something.
Mhm.
And you can just imagine how that's just going to get infused into every product and feature you can imagine out there. So all the models that are out now are all going to get better. There's nothing from a mathematical limitation here whatsoever, other than their ability to get compute and to get data to be able to make those models better. There's nothing seems to be in the way, especially the larger technology companies that have the wherewithal to make those models better. And so you kind of have to think ahead and say, well, what happens when Chat GPT-5 comes out, or Google Gemini's next model? What does that mean for all of us? And certainly, we're kind of in this assistant phase where it helps us as an assistant. It hasn't progressed to the point of being, a full autonomous employee that can do work and make decisions on their own. Certainly heading in that direction. There's a great quote from Benedict Evans, who's an analyst. He says, when you have a new tool, in the beginning, you make it fit what you're already doing. Then over time, you change how you work to fit the tool. And so we're clearly in the first phase and say, okay, how can I use GPT to help me do this better, suggest ideas, to make me write this thing better. But over time, it's going to become really to change the workflow and how we all work. So that is too far out to really get a firm sense of it. I can say now, though, that I've done a lot of experimentation on my own. I've been kind of an AI nerd for a long time around the predictive aspect of it and how that ties to risk. And it's in circumstances in which the data is human behavior, it's extremely hard, if not impossible, to have any sort of predictive element to it. If it's the weather, that scientific data tends to have some more, that's a little bit more predictable. Weather is,
Mhm.
it's difficult to predict, but there has been, for example, DeepMind has a new model called GraphCast that has created a 10-day forecast that beats every model. And they've done that through just a heavy lifting machine learning and lots of data points. But if you try to apply that to, well, are there going to be geopolitical shifts in this particular, country, and how's that going to change the impact supply chains? That is just something that no one has nailed, and I think it's going to be very difficult to do if there has any human behavior aspect to it. But for in the shorter term, I think there's certainly benefits to use generative AI as an assistant to help you write better, to help you create better, geopolitical risk reporting. Clearly keeping in mind, though, that sometimes they get the information wrong. So you got to check your work. Someone else referred to this as like having a million interns. So it's you're going to check your interns' work before you move forward with it.
Yeah, I think AI is here to stay for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not going to go
Um,
away. And I
yeah,
go ahead.
it's frightening, right? I mean, I think there's, the 5 to 10 year effects are going to really change the workforce in many ways. And that's challenging for folks who are kind of mid-career or later career. If you're brand new to the job market, then that's great. You can kind of focus on things you feel will tend to be a little more resilient. But for those that are a little bit more, who've been around for a while and in a single career, it's a bit of a challenge. But it's not going to happen overnight.
No, I know I've been experimenting with ChatGPT for a while now, just on my own and with a few little things that I'm doing to try and figure things out a little bit easier. And one of the points you made that there's a little box now that says, AI can help you, Zoom here, we're using Zoom. There's a box for using that here. but even on LinkedIn, where I typed in one sentence and a box popped up says get AI or get, I forget the
Right,
exact wording,
exactly.
but get AI to help you reword this. And I'm like, but it's only one
Right.
sentence. Like, one sentence with 10 words. How much better could it be?
Right. Yeah, I think there'll be over time too. I think there'll be a bit of a not a backlash, but kind of a pulling back, right? You can imagine just having AI suggestions for everything, AI agents for everything. Every time you go to talk to, any service or online, it's an AI thing that's talking with you. And pretty soon you'll see this idea of like human verified, or it's
Mhm.
as being a marketing benefit of being human. I think we'll have some kind of a resurgence here. The timing, I don't know, but you could see how there'd be a bit of a backlash, just too much AI all at once.
Yeah, I've encountered that actually, the example you just brought forward, on online help. So I was using it and uh, quote unquote chatting with someone, but yet they just weren't understanding what I was saying over and over again. And I was getting more and more frustrated that finally I just said, I've had enough with this. And I called the helpline instead and talked to a real person. And they said, yeah, that was AI you were talking to. It's not the best. I said,
Right.
I figured it was either a really, really, really bad employee who knows nothing, or it was AI or something. So our
Yeah.
next, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I just say, I mean, it would be great if in those circumstances, those brands disclose that it was an AI. I
Yeah,
think that, something that should just be a general courtesy across the board.
yeah, that would have been nice. Would have calmed me down a bit. The next one you kind of hinted at actually earlier, media manipulation. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, well, it's the deep fakes have been talked about for years, and this kind of how it just became its own hype and nothing has really transformatively happen in the deep fake space. But we are getting to the point on video now that it's approaching the ability to be pretty real, and the on the photo side, it's already just about there with the latest Midjourney version. But where we are seeing the early deep fakes is around voice cloning, and just the other day with the Biden robocall, there was a voice clone of Biden that was a robocall for New Hampshire, and calling folks at home saying that don't go vote for Biden. That's an actual concerning use case. Lots of these use cases are just sort of the media will write about it and people will get excited about it, but it didn't really have much impact. But in the case of having a really convincing robocall ahead of an election, telling people to stay home, that has a material impact. And so I think we'll start seeing some of these and coming here with a year full of elections. There's more opportunities to use this and tend to be, I think, folks that are forever the sort of attack ads of elections. There tend to be that's kind of a place where people are a little more open to pushing the boundaries than where you might see in other use cases. And so I wouldn't, there's already been some, AI photos and attack ads, and I can imagine that just becoming sort of commonplace. So then again, it kind of goes back to what can you believe?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's so much of this is that's synthetic. And so that's really, I think, what we'll see. And then also another piece of this is that I think those of us that work in the media have always said, well, how did it feels like it's inherently wrong to alter something. But it's becoming a feature. So if you're using there's the Google Pixel phone where you have something called best take. You can take like 4 or 5 pictures of your family. It'll take the best faces of all those 4 or 5 pictures and knit them together and make a beautiful family photo. And it looks great. And that's just, it might seem a little bit odd. And there's Instagram has some features, and now where you can put any backdrop behind you that you want. And so it's just going to be all these sort of social media photo tools will have the ability to alter reality as a feature, not a bug, right? It's something that people will, especially younger people, think is really cool, really exciting. And there's no stopping it. That's just going to be the new norm. And how to deal with that becomes the challenge. But I think that uh, it's interesting. It has to be a bit of a philosophical shift for those that tend to be a little bit older and tend to be, feel like this media altering business is not a good thing.
Yeah.
It is now going to be everywhere, and it's going to be, kids are going to think it's fun, and it has to be dealt with through other ways.
Yeah, there's a commercial playing up here. I don't know if it's down there. It's to do with one of the new phones that are coming out. And you can change the sky behind you. You can get rid of some of the background that's there. So it doesn't even look real anymore. Not even what the original photo of the person is. They're in a completely different world, and it could pass as real. And that could
Yeah.
cause people to make wrong decisions, based on what they're seeing through either a robocall or commercials that are using it and showing us how to use it. Put those together, and could believe the wrong thing. And you're not going to just be manipulating the media; you could be manipulating people now.
Yeah, absolutely.
You the next one is fracturing of social media, and you kind of touched on this earlier as well.
Yeah, I think, Twitter has been for years really the place where breaking news happens. And you kind of think back to the olden days of when bin Laden was killed, and prior to President Obama's press conference, there was all kinds of speculation on Twitter, and there was a guy that posted the tweet about the helicopters over his house in Pakistan, and that was, got everybody this excited, this notion, well, wow, we can detect events way ahead of time, way ahead of the media by finding those needles in the haystack on Twitter. And so there was such a movement toward tools that could do social listening, that could find this information. And that's great when there's one platform that's central, where everything is. But what happens when that platform begins to splinter into other platforms? And so, Twitter still remains very solid around the world, but in the US has seen some attrition, where you have folks that have moved to other platforms. Maybe they moved to Mastodon, maybe they moved to Threads, maybe they just completely move off that, the text-based real-time stuff, and maybe they're on Reddit or Instagram or TikTok, or there's so many different sources now. And so that becomes really challenging because many of those sources where people move are also less public. I think there's, there's actually been some studies on this, that people are tending to post things publicly less and opting for either pseudo-public or fully private environments. So it might be a close-knit set of friends that is, in some sort of messaging group, or something else you've set up. And so if you work in risk intelligence and you're trying to find publicly available, OSINT, open source information on the internet, that becomes really challenging. And so this is, I think, going to just continue to be the way. I don't think that Mastodon nor Threads is going to completely take over for Twitter. I think Twitter will still have a role. There's just going to be more data in more places. And then the sourcing becomes just more challenging, because you can lift something from one source and post it on another, acting as if you authored it. And it really creates a challenge to back identify what the original source was. There's Reddit's picked up again. After a bit of a lull, you have Telegram that's really picked up for the Russia-Ukraine, really fueled that, and now Israel-Gaza to some extent. So lots of very active platforms that have a subset of people using them, which really makes things a little bit more challenging.
Two quick things, because you mentioned older generations and younger generations and different thinking of social media and how to use it. My nieces, who are all 13 and under, Facebook is for old people.
Oh yeah.
They don't use it at all. They couldn't care less,
Yeah,
you know. And
very true.
sorry?
No, it is true. I think the Facebook itself skews older. And TikTok has been the just an amazing how much growth that it has seen. And TikTok started kind of younger and is now growing older, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
becoming broader, but TikTok also has limited access. So if you're, a researcher or into OSINT, and you want to look at different data on TikTok, you can do some searching, but it's limited, and there isn't full API access. You can't just go in and grab whatever you want. So
Yeah.
there's all these limitations there.
Well, and on that point, you mentioned also that with so many different platforms out there that people are able to just go snag a story and pass it off as their own. In Canada, last year, they passed a law that you can't do that anymore. Places like Facebook used to do that, to post a story on Facebook so you could
Yep.
get your news if you got your news through Facebook. But the people that wrote it, the original source, would get no credit and wouldn't get paid for it. Facebook would. So they passed a law in Canada that said, no, 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 you can't do that anymore. That's not fair to journalists and, other news agencies, legitimate ones that are out there, you stealing their material and passing it off as your own, and you getting the money for it and not them. So they passed a law in Canada that you can't do that.
Yeah, that whole space of determining what is copyright in news and what is fair use is a very active one, especially now with the rise of AI and news sites blocking AIs from having access to their sites for either training purposes or for indexing purposes. And so that's I didn't add that in the report, but it's a very interesting storyline to watch as we move ahead. It's OpenAI said that they're in active talks with a number of large news organizations about licensing their data, and so we'll see where that lands. But really fascinating to news organizations obviously are economically pressured and are in sort of defense mode and trying to find new ways to generate revenue. So yeah, it's a tough environment.
It is. And on that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We are talking with Cory Bergman today on the risk intelligence forecast for 2024, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.